Good morning. It's not often I have to adjust the microphone up. It's quite a treat. I'm delighted to be here this morning and share with you a reading from the Gospel according to John. Jesus appeared again to the disciples, this time at the Sea of Galilee. This is how he did it. Simon Peter, known as the Rock, Thomas, the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the brothers Zebedee, who are known as the sons of thunder, and two other disciples were together. Simon Peter announced, "I'm going fishing." The rest of them replied, "We'll go with you." They went out and got in the boat. They caught nothing that night. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they didn't recognize him. Jesus spoke to them, "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" They answered, "No." He said, "Throw the net off the right side of the boat and see what happens." They did what he said. All of a sudden, there were so many fish in it that they weren't strong enough to pull it in. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Master." When Simon Peter realized that it was the Master, he threw on some clothes, for he was stripped for work, and dove into the sea. The other disciples came in by boat, for they weren't far from land, 100 yards or so, pulling along the net full of fish. When they got out of the boat, they saw Jesus had a fire going, with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish you've just caught." Simon Peter joined them and pulled the net to shore. It was full of 153 big fish. And even with all those fish, the net didn't rip. Jesus said, "Breakfast is ready." Not one of the disciples dared ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Master. Jesus then took the bread and gave it to them. He did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus had shown himself alive to the disciples since being raised from the dead. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Lynn. God be with you. Are we still doing all right? We're still here? Okay. So if you're just joining us, or this whole church thing is a little new and strange to you, we are in the season of Easter. Because for us in the church, Easter is not just one day, it's an entire season. And the whole season, all the time in it, is really meant to be where we learn about what it means to be, as Drew put it on Easter, people of resurrection. Not just people who celebrate Easter, but people who let the truths of Easter, those truths of the worst thing isn't the last thing, those truths of love is the way of the universe, that death is our friend, that resurrection happens. It's becoming people who let those truths shape all that we are and all that we do. That's what Easter is about. And we have this season to do that because it reminds us that Easter simply isn't about proclaiming Christ is risen, but rather it's about embodying that. It's about integrating that. Because I have to think, and let me know if you agree with this, that so often when it comes to our spirituality, we really put the emphasis on confessing our beliefs. It's really about what we know. It's really about how well we can articulate it. It's really about our bookshelf and what we've read and the podcasts we listen to. But if you look at what Jesus teaches, he doesn't seem too interested in what we believe. He seems more interested in how we let what we believe shape how we live. He's more concerned about our hearts than our heads. And so we get this whole season of Easter to let those truths that we can name wonderfully and craft beautiful worship services around sink into our bodies, sink into our hearts, and let that change how we live and move and have our being in the world. And so today the plan is to look at that story we just heard, that story of one of the times Jesus shows up after the resurrection. And we're going to ask, what does that teach us about how to be human and alive in the world? What can we learn in that story about those truths and how they can shape how we live and move and have our being, how we can see the world? So the plan is we're going to look at 3 different parts of that story. We'll ask some questions, and then somehow at the end it'll all come together, and we'll leave here being like, I know how to navigate this now. That's goal A. Goal B is, interesting. I'm going to sit with that. Goal C is, period. Okay. Are you with me? Okay, cool. I mean, is a good place to be. Like that's a place that you just need to sit sometimes. And so if you're there, like, I should not have ordered those goals. Those are just goals. Anyways, so the story starts, and we have 7 of the disciples, and we get to see their nicknames. Jesus had a thing for nicknames. Most of them are pretty rad. You get Peter the Rock. You get James and John, the sons of thunder. Thomas the twin, and then Nathaniel. He's just where he's from. He's just Gary from Burlington. We could talk a lot about why Jesus gives people nicknames, but we'll save that for another day. But we're told that they go fishing. And now a super common take on this story, and if you've been going to church long enough, especially in certain churches, the take you would have heard is that this whole part of the story is a story of spiritual failure. That the disciples are actually doing something wrong here. Because instead of doing what Jesus told them to go and do, instead of being apostles, instead of going out and spreading the message and building God's world, they go fishing. And if you think of this story in terms of direction, which direction are they going? They're going back. They're going backwards. Because if you know these stories, you know that the disciples are fishermen. And so what the story kind of portrays, if you want to hold it this way, is these disciples going back to what they knew. Instead of going forward to the way that we think Jesus is calling them, forward into new life, forward into a new calling, forward into new identities, they choose to go backwards. And on the one hand, I get it. Because not only are they like freaking out that Jesus not only died, then came back to life and he's showing up again. And when we're freaking out, we tend to go back to what's familiar. But it also kind of gets at this idea that we love to sell as Christians and say it's all about becoming new. You have these huge epiphanies, you have these huge resurrection experiences, the air gets rearranged, and we so badly want that to reset everything. And we're like, wow, I understand myself and the world in a whole new way. And I'm just gonna go out and do a hard reset and be a completely new kind of person. And we love to sell the story this way. It's all about have new values, being a new kind of person. You leave your old life behind and you step into a new one. But as I look at the story, I have to say, sure. Sometimes when we experience these huge, beautiful truths, a huge transformative reset is what's required. But then I have to go, no, hard, no. Because this whole idea that a life-changing moment should pull us out of our lives? No, I don't think that's what the story is saying. I think actually the story is saying something quite different about what we do with those moments of resurrection revelation, epiphany, whatever you want to call it, those aha moments where everything becomes clear. Because I think what the story is saying about those moments is they don't remove us from our lives. They actually send us back into them just in a new way. Because what we get here in this story is that when we experience these truths of Easter, these ideas that the worst is not the last, that death can be our friend, that love is the way, it's not burn it all down and start over, but it's something far less dramatic, but maybe infinitely more difficult, but infinitely more beautiful and transformative. And that's we take these truths that we get and we take them back into what we've always had. We go back into our relationships, but we do it more softly. We go back into our families, but we do it less reactively. We go back into our jobs, but we see it not just as a way to make money, but we see it as a way to serve. We look at our bodies and we see our bodies as holy. We go back into our neighborhoods and see it as an opportunity to love our neighbors. We go back into the same world with the same problems, but we don't see it as doomed. I have to think that's the movement that we see here with the disciples going back to fish. It's not about having these huge experiences and escaping it all. It's about having these huge experiences and engaging it all. It's going back to the same calendar, the same house, the same people, the same responsibilities, but with a new heart, new eyes, new courage, new values, and asking the very simple but infinitely complex question, how do I be a source of life and love here? How do I be God's presence here? How do I be a source of resurrection here? And it's about doing that, because if the whole idea is about letting these truths change us so we can go out and change the world, like, how could it be any other way? It wouldn't work any other way. We have to go back. Of course we have to go fishing. We just have to go fishing in a brand new way. Because yes, sometimes we have to leave things behind, full stop. Yes, yes, yes. But most of the time, the trick is really, how do I engage in a new way? And so the questions this part of the story gives us is, was it actually look for you, for us, to go back to our lives and to our world with the truths of Easter in hand? What does it actually look like for you to live out this belief that the worst thing is not the last thing? What does it look like for you in your friendships, your relationships, your neighborhood, to live out this idea that love is the most important thing in the universe? How do you incorporate that into all that you are and all that you do? So they go back fishing. Not because Easter didn't take, but because resurrection doesn't remove you, it sends us back into it. And they're out there, and they don't catch anything, which is hilarious. They're not having a good day. And we could talk all about that too, but we won't, because who shows up? Jesus shows up. He's on the beach. And we're told that the disciples don't recognize him, which is actually a theme in all of the resurrection stories. And every single time Jesus shows up post-resurrection, they don't recognize him. Which the first time, cool. Like, why would you recognize him? The guy is dead. Cool, I get it. But the second time, the third time, you still don't recognize him? Like, I would think by that point when the word gets around that you would be like so hyper aware of like, is that Jesus? Is he back again? Is that him? Is that him? Is that, like, you would want it to be him. Your first thought is going to be, clearly it's Jesus. But they don't. Again and again and again, with every single resurrection story, they don't recognize him. So why? What is this pattern trying to say to us? Why is it always only when he says their name, only when he does something familiar like breaking bread, or only when he gives this like very simple but like profound advice of, have you tried doing it a new way? It's only then that it clicks. It's only then that they're like, oh, it's Jesus. And so what is that trying to teach us about becoming people of resurrection? There's this really ancient story about Carl Jung. And someone comes up to Carl Jung and they're complaining about how nobody can see God anymore, how God isn't around anymore. And Carl Jung, he replies, oh, I don't think the problem is God's not around. I think the problem is no one looks low enough for God anymore. And I think that's true. I think so often the reason we don't see God, and so often the reason we don't see what is good and holy and reverent, isn't because nothing holy, good, and reverent isn't there, isn't because God isn't around, but it's because we're looking in the wrong places. We're looking at the wrong things. Because if you are like me, when it comes to God, when it comes to those good, holy, beautiful things like joy and love and peace and hope and beauty, those life-giving forces that change everything, we tend to look up, don't we? We tend to look for the big, the spectacular, the loud, the verbose, the wondrous, those things that will smack us across the face and be like, I am God. Right? That's what we expect. And sure, those things can definitely happen. Let's leave some room for that. But I think if we're honest, I would think if we actually look at our experiences, if we trust our experiences, and if we look at what our tradition teaches us, when it comes to where God shows up, when it comes to what is good and true and holy, more often than not, God uses a side door instead of coming in the front. Anyone with me on that one? Yeah, despite what we want, despite what we expect, we get a God who uses a side door. More often than not, it's something lower than higher. More often than not, what is good and holy and true, where God shows up, is in the courage to try again. It's in that apology you finally get. It's in the stranger who helps you out. It's in the growth that happened that you didn't know it happened until it happened. It's in the friend who calls at the right time. My favorite is in the barista when she remembers my order before I say it. Because I'm seen, I'm remembered, I'm known, God's showing up. And we know these things, right? If we look back on our lives, those are the moments when the holy shows up. And for whatever reason it is, we have a God who shows up not with performance, but with presence. And I wonder if one of the things that we can hear in this story is that the problem we have isn't God's absence. The problem we have is our attention. The problem we have is our expectation. The problem is so often we just cannot fathom the kind of God who would show up and make us breakfast. But that's the God we get. A God who shows up in the simple things like making you breakfast. And so as you head out into this week, the questions this part asks you is, where are you looking for God? And maybe you need to lower the gaze a little bit. Maybe you need to check your expectations a little bit. And maybe it's in the simple, tiny little things, those side doors. That's where God is showing up. And that's where you can encounter the divine. And so they realize it's Jesus, and they all rush to see him. He's got a barbecue going on the beach. He's cooking breakfast for everyone. And then Jesus goes, oh, bring some fish that you caught. And we got to pull over here because this is hilarious and fascinating. Because you would think, at least I would think, and maybe this could just be me, but I would think when God comes back from the dead, and God's like, we're throwing a party because I am back and we are rebooting this entire thing, you would think he would cater to the party. I mean, you, sir, are the risen Christ. You do not need anything from me. You can cater the party. Thank you very much. And I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Because I think in some way we all think that. Because the way we talk about God says that. So when it comes to talking about God, the kind of God we talk about is the kind of God who brings everything. It's the kind of God who fixes everything, who handles everything. It's the kind of God who doesn't really need us. And when we do say God needs our help, it's kind of in the way where adults ask toddlers to help out with cookies. Like, you don't really need our help. It's just a kind, loving thing to do, but you don't really need it. That's how we talk about God. And even if we're not conscious of it, these are the kinds of ideas then we get about God, that God brings it all, that God can do it all, and we're just kind of invited. But what we get here is something completely different. Because what if Jesus actually needs the fish? What if he didn't bring enough? What if the party God is throwing is more potluck than catered? What if what we see in this story is that God is not a solo act, but God is a God of collaboration and cooperation? What if we see in this story is that God actually needs us? And just sit with that for a moment, because that's gonna slam up against that other notion of God that we have deep within us. But sit with it for a moment. What if God actually needs us? Because here's the thing. If resurrection does teach us that love is the way of the world, if it does say that we can have a world of justice, of love, of peace, this world where everyone has enough and everyone has a place, if that's what's possible, if that's what's meant to be, none of it gets built alone. None of it can get built alone. It only, by principle, can get built together. It only happens when we all come together and bring what we have together and do it together. Love doesn't work any other way. If it's love, it's collaborative. And I wonder if we can see this in that fascinating, weird little detail about how many fish the disciples catch. Because they don't just say a lot of fish. And they don't just make up a number of it's 100 fish. No, they name the number, 153 fish. And now people have all kinds of theories on this, but let's try on this one. Ancient Jewish numerology saw 153 as a number of fullness. It represented completion. It represented everything. And so in other words, what the disciples have for Jesus' barbecue, or to zoom out a little bit, what the disciples have for God's world is everything. And because these stories are our stories, so if it's true for them, it's true for us. When it comes to creating lives of depth and fullness, when it comes to creating a just world, when it comes to making this world one where everybody has enough and everyone has a place, when it comes to this project that God is inviting us to, we have everything that's needed. We have the food to feed people. We have the money to care for people. We have the knowledge to solve problems. We have the hands to do the work. We have the compassion to change lives. We have the truth to speak to power. We have everything that we need to get there. And we need to hear this part of the story because when it comes to changing the universe, it reminds us that we have everything that we need. We don't lack resources. What we lack is courage. What we lack is cooperation. What we lack is willingness. What we lack is imagination. It's trust. What we lack is the idea that we can actually do something. Because so often we say, God, feed the hungry. And I think this story teaches us that God's out there being like, you feed the hungry. I gave you everything. I gave you fields. I gave you seeds. I gave you hands. I gave you each other. I gave you wisdom. I gave you tenderness. I gave you outrage. I gave you imagination. I gave you fish. You have everything you need. Just do it. I am here to help, but you have everything. Because if that's true, suddenly how we pray fundamentally shifts. And this will change everything for you. Because no longer, whatever it is that we're talking about, no longer is it God do something. It becomes God help me do something. So what can you bring? What do you got? What's in your net? You have it. We have it. All we have to do is show up. All we have to do is say, this is what I got. Because what the story teaches us, I think, is that God is waiting for you. God is waiting for me. God is waiting for us to bring who we are, to bring what we have, and help change the world for the better. Because it's not going to happen on its own. I think we know that. So what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? It's that basic. It's that simple. We have what we need to change everything. And we know this. You who have experienced community, you who have been in recovery, you who have gone through the trenches, you know that when people show up with what they have, their stories, their truths, their resources, things happen. As we said at the top, if you show up, everything changes. So what do you got? As a church, that's what we're all about, is being a place where people can come, show up, bring what they have, and change the world. For whatever reason, this is how God designed the universe, to change it through love, which means it's collaborative, which means it's cooperative, which means God needs you. God needs us. It's not going to happen any other way. So what do you got? And as a church family, we exist to change the world in and through love, as we said. And one of the ways that we can change it is by pooling our resources and saying, we want to be the kind of place where people can feel belonging, where people can experience and serve justice, where people can show up just as they are and change and change and change. The offering is going to be received as we sing this next song. And so I want you to give generously, whether it is money, whether it is your skills and your voice, or maybe it's just your presence and just showing up. All of it counts, all of it matters. And as we sing this next song, we're going to lean into the fact that even though we have what God needs, we also need God. Because showing up is hard. Having imagination is hard. Cooperating is hard, especially when it's with people you don't like. And it's doing hard things, and it's changing systems that oppress, and changing narratives, and overcoming hard things. We still need God. And so this song is going to be a coming together. Us and the universe, us and the Spirit to change this so we can change that, bringing all that we are and all that we have together to transform our hearts and this world. And so may you give generously, may you show up fully and know that God will meet you here and change it all. Let's stand up and let's sing together.